Very good. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the second in our series of FinTech briefings that we've delighted to be running jointly with the World Alliance of International Financial Centres. Last week, you may remember, for those of you that joined last week, we had representatives from London, from Paris, from Toronto, and this week we turn our gaze completely the opposite direction, looking across Europe from Luxembourg, across to the Middle East and the Gulf in Doha, and over to Helene, who's based in Hong Kong. And we're going to have a discussion both about a kind of Europe, Middle East and Asian perspective on the impact of COVID on financial services, the shape of the recovery coming out of it and some of the opportunities. And also, I think, quite an interesting discussion today about the role that smaller financial and fintech centres can play in fintech. I just wanted to reflect back on that, because when we launched the index rankings at the end of last year, what became very clear was that smaller locations, both countries and cities, could compete on a par with much larger hubs. And we saw in the rankings that we published, which really looked at the quality, quantity, and the type of fintech activity happening in locations, that small places could do extremely well. So Latvia as a country, I think, came fourth in terms of the density of fintech activity, and as a result, we also saw Vilnius as a city doing very well and enjoying a strong place in the top 40 fintech hubs worldwide. At the same time, we created the index because we knew and we could feel that financial services as an industry was globalizing. And again, the index has started to show us that the old guard of financial services are still important. New York and London, Paris and Frankfurt, are key stakeholders in financial services globally, but increasingly other locations in what we used to think of as emerging markets or remote regions are coming in and are also able to develop strong fintech hubs, which we think will have a dramatic impact on financial services in the years to come. I don't want to talk too much about ourselves today, because this is really very much an opportunity, an opportunity for you as the audience to ask our panelists today your questions, about the challenges you're having, to think about, how the market might come together to come up with, solutions, and take some of the opportunities that the crisis will surely create. We've got a great panel today, as I say. We have an interactive discussion after individual statements from each of our panelists. But first, I'm going to hand over very briefly to Jochen, our friend and partner at the World Alliance today, for a brief introduction and a welcome from him. And from there, we will then turn over to Helen, who's in Hong Kong, who's going to give her views on fintech in Asia and some of the opportunities ahead as the world recovers from a fairly unprecedented experience. Jochen, over to you, and welcome, and good to have you back.
Simon, thank you very much for this kind introduction, and also, of course, for being our host again today. So as a World Alliance, we are very proud to work with you for realizing this FinTech webinar series. As a start, I would like to briefly introduce the World Alliance of International Financial Centres, for those of you who are not familiar with our work yet. We are a non-profit association based in Belgium, representing now 17 international financial centers of 4 continents. Our members are either city governments or similar institutions which are in charge of developing and promoting their financial centers. And as a World Alliance, we organize the collaboration between global financial centers, between our members, as well as the exchange of best practice. We run projects together, for instance, in FinTech, which is today's topic. Currently, besides FinTech, we are very busy in preparing the economic recovery from the current pandemic. We need to do, all of us, our best to minimize the negative impacts on our economies and also on our societies. And we are convinced we can do so in the best possible way by acting together. If you're interested in our work in a little bit more detail, please make sure to check our website, wafc.finance, and also read our recent reports, for instance, on the COVID-19 pandemic and what financial centers can help to combat the pandemic. And we will also publish further reports in the coming months. So please stay tuned. So much very briefly to introduce our work, what we do at the World Alliance, and back to the topic of FinTech. I think we have very excellent speakers today. Simon, you have mentioned this already, from Hong Kong, from Doha, and from Luxembourg. All three are members of the World Alliance. Yeah, I'm very looking forward to a nice discussion, which will also cover this important topic, FinTech. This is where the innovations are in the financial sector, and we need to make sure that we don't lose this power of innovation in the financial industry due to this current crisis. Simon, back to you.
Thank you, Jochen. Absolutely, that's a great message. Helen, good afternoon to you. How are things in Hong Kong? And tell us a little bit about how the market has adapted, how it's recovering, and your views of, I guess, really the next, I think the next few months into 2021, as everybody seems to be thinking about at the moment.
Right, thank you so much, Simon, and thank you, Jochen, for having us. It's truly an international panel. Delighted to be joining this. Asia is actually in a very unique position, I think, throughout this pandemic. Because although, from January, February onwards, there has been lots of outbreaks, China, across Asia, and so on. I think in Hong Kong, at least, we had the benefits of fighting the SARS battle. So we sort of took it pretty seriously right from the start, did all the personal precautions and everything. So I think relatively, we're not in a lockdown situation, managed to control the local community outbreak. There are some imported cases, but for a population of about 6-7 million, we have about 1,000 cases and very low mortality rate. So, touch wood, it's not too bad a situation, but we really are in the same boat when it comes to the economic impact that COVID had suddenly and severely brought on. Now, let me share a couple of points here that you may or may not be aware of. I think Hong Kong as a financial hub, as a financial center, and in particular as a FinTech development hub in the world, actually, if you look at the adoption rate of FinTech, as EY and a couple of other big fours have put out, it's really ahead in the top 5 among the world. And by adoption rate, we refer to how actually the different verticals like AI or big data or payments or robo-advisory or other thematic verticals of FinTech have been adopted. We're not shy of creating quite a few unicorns of our own, not just leveraging the greater China unicorns like Ant Financial and so on. We have our own homegrown WeLab, our homegrown GoGo Van, and others. SenseTime, the big biometrics. But the interesting thing is that all these span a diverse landscape of FinTech. We don't just concentrate on payments. We don't just concentrate on exchange. We don't just concentrate on wealth tech. It really spans the whole spectrum from blockchain to AI to payments to robo-advisory and so on. Now, the other interesting thing I want to share in this COVID pandemic is that there are winners as well as losers. It's hard-hitting on the SMEs and startups who, of course, badly need the cash flow. I think a company can be not making a profit, so to speak, for a year or so, but you cannot survive for quite a few months without cash flow or with a huge dent in your cash flow. And unfortunately, that's the ugly scenario we are seeing, and that's what a lot of governments are doing to provide some relief funding and relief measures to help tie over the SMEs and the startups in this very challenging period. But the winners that come out of it, and we do see a few, they are people that have digitized offering or very strong digitized offering. whether it be e-commerce, whether it be digital wealth management, all that. People that have a strong digitized offering, they actually stand to gain, because suddenly people find that they cannot go to a physical shop. They have to shop online. They cannot take classes. They have to go to e-learning portals. So in Hong Kong recently, there's a big news about 8 Securities, a homegrown, digitized wealth tech outfit that actually was merged with Sophie, the big unicorn from Silicon Valley, because Sophie was taking this opportunity to move into Asia and overseas. So I think A Securities is just one example of people with a strong digitized offering that actually stand to gain, or have something extra to add to their overall business model as a result of the pandemic. But obviously, we need to look at what the scenario will be like post-COVID. What is the new normal? Are we going back to the old world? How much of the old habits, that we have developed, are we going to, go back to, or are there new ways of doing business as a result, triggered off by COVID, that we need to adapt to? I think all these are open-ended questions that probably other panelists and other audience today would have some views to share with us as well.
Thank you very much, Helen. Yes, absolutely. Some big questions, and I'm sure we could fill a couple of hours discussion, not just the 40-something minutes we have today on some of those areas. Can we now then, let's sort of zoom back around the world over to the Middle East. And let's hear from Henk, who's over in the Gulf, in Qatar. Henk, a lot happening in Qatar in all in all dimensions, and I think it's quite impressive hearing what Qatar has done in terms of establishing an innovation and increasingly a fintech hub there. Tell us a little bit about these. What are some of the changes you're seeing? What are some of the impacts, and how are you weathering and supporting your ecosystem over there?
Yeah, thank you, Simon. Thanks for having us on this webinar. Yes, of course, many things are happening in the world, and obviously Qatar is also affected by COVID. So luckily, the government took quite strict actions, I would say comparable to, let's say, a country like Singapore. So we have an extreme low mortality rate. I think it's also because of the good medical situation and a low, relatively low young population. So we are lucky in that extent. Still, we are in a sort of intelligent lockdown. We work mostly from home. The government has taken action by supporting SMEs with a program of more than $22 billion. So that is basically to support it, because remember, for Qatar, it is important, like many other countries in the GCC, to diversify the economy. So we cannot have a situation that this crisis will hit that, let's say, young business. Yeah, so I think all of the countries in GCC, they're hit now, again, also because of the low oil price. They need to step up when it comes to diversifying their business. And in Qatar, we are lucky because we produce LNG. We are the largest exporter of LNG and the lowest cost producer. So in terms of inflow, we're still safe, and the deficits will be under control. So we thought in terms of supporting this diversification of the economy, we have our financial center already since 15 years, and it has always been attracting international business. And fintech is now in the heart of our strategy, as well as media and sport. Obviously, with the sports events coming up, I think Qatar is the place to be. Maybe you can move on to the next slide.
Yes, of course.
So our focus is basically, Qatar itself is already an interesting market for any fintech, but the fintech companies that are already coming to us, they also select us because of the proximity of nearby markets and countries where otherwise you would have difficult access to, like Pakistan or even Turkey. There's some markets close by us where we have good connections with, and it would be easy to do business. Like many other financial centers, we have an UK common law set up. So that gives international companies some good feeling, you know, at least it's all English and people work well. We have about 80 double taxation treaties, so in terms of tax, it's fine. We are not a tax haven. We don't want to be a tax haven because I think it's these times not decent anymore not to pay tax. So we have a 10% tax, and we also see companies moving from a non-tax environment into a low-tax environment. So we are there. Specifically on fintechs, because most of the fintechs are startups. You know, they don't have fat on the bones yet, but they would like to have an encouraging situation, basically. And indeed, in this slide, you can see that that fintech is in the heart of our business, and we are basically preparing us for fintech and give them access to the market. Because if there's no business, you know, nobody will come. So we see a lot of interest, mainly from, I would say, Singapore, Europe, UK, companies that would like to expand. You know, the market is quite full in those markets. If you want to tap into this part of the world, where India, Pakistan, and the Middle East, you know, are very close by, we see people setting up here. And what we offer them is basically market access. We have a strong financial sector, and we have aligned those sectors as well, and to make sure that we can actually give them business. What are the domains? I think payments, specifically around paying back money home, you know, remittances, I think is important. The other thing, what is important is cyber security. Specifically in this part is Islamic finance is another domain, and anything cashless. You know, Qatar would like to have a cashless society when we have the World Championships here. So what has Qatar done? It's a collaborative model. It's not only QFC who's focusing on fintech. We do this together with the regulators and with the Qatar Development Bank and all the local banks and stakeholders. So we have formed an umbrella, which is the Qatar FinTech Hub. And the regulator, and I'm very happy with that, is taking the lead in this in terms of also preparing the regulations. So we'll soon launch our sandbox. On top of that, we have the Qatar Development Bank, our partner and co-developer of the fintech sector, who will launch its incubator and accelerator program soon. And we have the investment promotion agency who can actually support those companies that set up and basically cover part of the operational costs. So all in all, I think, you know, I think the differentiator is that we align ourselves. There's no competition. It is all teamwork, and the people that have come already to Qatar will see that difference. So yes, we may be a small financial center, as you said, you know, but I think we are capable of working together and creating a business. The other thing is we have already experienced a situation of crisis when we had the unfriendly blockade, and the country is ready to deal with this situation, specifically the financial sector. So now it's Ramadan, but we have our plans ready for after Ramadan, which you can see on this slide. And the accelerator and incubator program will start in June. And there's a whole schedule with hackathons. I think for those businesses that are affected in fintech, specifically access to investment is important. We have a lot of liquidity here. There's a lot of interest in tech in general and fintech specifically. So we would like to welcome those parties in Qatar, of course. And I realize there's a lot of promotion for Qatar, but I think in general, fintech is agile. I think the battle will be around the big tech, the traditional banks and the fintechs. So partnering fintechs with the traditional banking, I think that will be a game changer, and we are here to help them.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Henk, for the introduction, and good luck and congratulations on your plan for the year. It's very exciting. Let's come back now over to Europe and to you, Chris, at the heart of Europe. How's it going over there? You know, we know that things are starting to open up, which is must be a relief for everybody. And of course, Luxembourg, home to kind of the big European operations of the likes of Amazon and Rakuten. Tell us a little bit about what's happening over there with you.
Cool. Well, thank you, Simon and Jochen, for this opportunity. It's great to be part of, such an interesting and international webinar. I think, in some ways, what we're going through in Luxembourg at the moment is a bit of a return to the 70s, both in terms of hairstyles and, the kind of volumes of traffic that we're seeing. Luxembourg obviously is at the heart of Europe. And one of the things that's kind of defined it as a financial centre going previously was that kind of membership of the European Union. Under normal circumstances pre-COVID, we would have our population go up by about 25% each day, as workers from France, Belgium, and Germany, come to Luxembourg to work and then go home to live in in the neighbouring countries. And obviously, it has put a bit of a spanner in the works in that respect. It's the first time, I think, since the creation of the Schengen zone that we've really seen significant internal borders within the European Union emerge. So one of the things that I think has been quite positive as a result of that is the financial industry here in Luxembourg has been very capable of adapting to a situation, not just of working from home, but working from home internationally, so to speak. Having people work in France, Belgium, and Germany around, but still maintaining the financial centre as a whole here in Luxembourg. And cross-border cooperation remains of utmost priority even in the current situation. We've seen that to a certain extent by just on the health side. We Luxembourg hospitals have been supporting people who have got COVID in Lorraine, in the bordering locations in France, and bringing them to the hospitals to be treated here and sent back to France. So that's been, I think, a really good positive sign of European solidarity and collaboration. Just to talk very briefly about the Luxembourg Financial Centre before moving on to the impacts of COVID and then what we see as the future. Luxembourg has a very cross-border focused financial centre, which originated firstly in the capital markets industry. Luxembourg is the home of the Eurobonds, the Eurobond market. It's got about 125 banks from many countries around the world. It currently has an asset management industry that has around 4 trillion euros of assets under management, which makes it the second largest location for asset management worldwide after the US. And then it also has a very diversified insurance sector, primarily previously in the life insurance sector, but recently there's been a big uptick also in non-life insurance. Measures for COVID came into place in Luxembourg in about mid-March and are currently in the process of being eased. So our schools started to go back this Monday, and hopefully, all things being equal, the lockdown will come to an end at the end of May, around the 25th of May. The government has also done a lot in terms of funding support. It's introduced around 36 measures, including both grants and loan deferrals, reporting deferrals, and 26 of those 36 measures target SMEs. So they definitely understand that, particularly for small businesses, this is a very tricky time. We're starting to see some of the data come in about the impact, particularly on the fund industry. So we have our statistics for March, where we saw fund industry assets under management down about 11% in March, which sounds a lot, but actually we're taking as a fairly positive sign, because about 8.37% of that comes from AUM shrinkage as markets contract globally. And there's only actually a very small percent of around 2.7%, which is actually as a result of outflows, as a result of redemptions. So we're cautiously optimistic. We think that things are moving in a positive direction, both in terms of the number of, getting out of a lockdown situation, and also from a kind of economic perspective. We could perhaps say that there's light at the end of the tunnel here in Luxembourg. hopefully it is indeed the end of the tunnel rather than the headlights of an oncoming train. I think in terms of the shape of the recovery, one thing that's become very clear during this period is that it's been a real catalyst for digital services, both in terms of obviously the teleworking, working from home setups, but also in terms of contactless payments. We've seen a big uptake in terms of digital payments channels, including increases in terms of the amounts that you can use contactless payments for. But generally speaking, at the moment, those uptakes are primarily favoured the big tech or established platforms rather than necessarily being, you know, a wind in the sails of SMEs or small fintechs, who are, you know, doubly caught in between funding rounds potentially in quite a lot of state circumstances. So I think one of the things that we need to see coming out of the crisis is making sure that those SMEs actually maintain a certain level of funding, and that the financial ecosystems that we have are able to ensure that they do keep on funding those kind of innovative projects. Another aspect I think that is that the COVID highlights is that going forward, growth will have to come in a different way from how it does before. I think, I'm sure that lots of you have seen that Warren Buffett, for instance, has pulled out of the airline industry, saying that the world has fundamentally changed. And I think that going forward, there will be likely a very strong focus on sustainable finance, which is also an area where Luxembourg has particular strengths. So those are kind of like my introductory thoughts. I'm happy, obviously, to have some discussion with you going forwards about those topics, and looking forward to discussing with panelists how they see the emergence from the crisis.
Thank you very much, Chris, and yes, thank you all of you for those insightful introductions. Just to say to you, our participants, listening in today, make sure you take advantage of the panel that we've got. Please do ask us questions. The questions will come to me, and you can field them to your, to the intended panelists or to the group. Let's kick off though. I think we're quite privileged today to have a combination of centres, Doha, Luxembourg, Hong Kong, that have really, that are, in essence, self-contained places that have built or are building financial centres geared to connectivity with their wider regions. And I wonder, what impact has the crisis had on that view? Is your focus changing? Is it creating opportunities, that are of a different dynamic, because you happen to think that it's digital first, if not digital only? And what have you learned in terms of the direction in the future for your respective cities from the last couple of months? Perhaps Henk, we can start with you, because I know that you've got quite an upbeat view based on the experience from difficult relations with the neighbours, shall we say, over the last couple of years.
Yeah, so luckily we have a very good relationship with most of the neighbours. But I think in Qatar we have a young population, tech savvy. The government is luckily a professional government where you see a lot of investments in tech and digital. So blockchain technology is something if there's invested in. So we see let's say a modern emerging a country where they will embrace those technologies. So that new normal that we're discussing about, I think people will like that here. People will invest in it, and people will adopt it. I think, it will not go seamlessly, of course, but I think this part of the world is ready to it, and we would like to also embrace people who have new ideas and basically can do things better. We are an open economy, so we are exporting, we are importing, exporting investments. So we were an investor into other countries and industries. So I think this new normal will be around, yes, digital when it comes to cash and everything, but also more smooth systems, new customer demands, basically, because nobody wants to go back to a situation where you only have to go to branches to get your services done. Unfortunately, I think we will see that there will be less flying, but Qatar is quite committed. I think we are one of the only airlines. We keep on flying. I think the motto is, sending, basically making sure that people go home. So Qatar is really a hub between Asia and Europe. So I think we will have that connectivity, but I think we have to get used to things like this, more interaction through digital platforms, and we are basically ready to continue on that path.
Thank you very much, Henk. Helen, can we turn to you in Hong Kong? Hong Kong, already an established financial centre, and increasingly, a lot more fintech activity over the last few years. But also, there's more competition, perhaps in East Asia than there was previously. Obviously, Singapore has also focused very heavily on fintech and continues to do so. You've had challenges with the protests in Hong Kong, which have made business a little more difficult. Is your strategy shifting, or is Hong Kong and its sort of adjacency to China still going to provide a kind of very significant impetus and pillar of your strategy for building fintech and financial services in Hong Kong?
Well, that's a great question, actually, Simon. And I think I just want to pick on a couple of the points that Chris, in particular, from Luxembourg, raised. I think COVID has, competition aside, and the kind of different geopolitical scenarios aside, I think COVID has really exposed a lot of cracks in our system. Okay, the cracks can be from supply chain. Is our supply chain as robust as we had planned for it to be? Travel industry, digitization, people working remotely. Do we need such huge office space? Does everybody need to be working in an office environment, or are there remote working tools that can deliver the same level of productivity, and so on? So these are all questions that was suddenly thrown into the forefront by COVID. And I think the interesting thing for us in Hong Kong, and I think in Asia as a whole, is that you might notice Asia, it's actually, competition aside, it's very interconnected. Hong Kong is not only connected to China, Hong Kong is also connected with other North Asian markets, and also even Southeast Asian markets. If you really look at as a capital market, as a financial center, the number of IPOs in Hong Kong, I think, ranked globally number 4, only after London, New York, and Tokyo. I think that actually speaks, very loudly in terms of the fundraising capabilities in a financial hub like Hong Kong, but also the diversity. If I look at the membership of the FinTech Association, it comprises of big corporates, naturally, magic circle law firms, of course, but also, different sizes of startups, different sizes of SMEs, and even students and individual members, which are vital for the success and the ongoing, prosperity, if you like, of the ecosystem. And I think we have been able to build that. And that, inclusiveness, I think, has given us a bit of resilience, a bit of staying power in terms of, helping each other out in this community, and also looking at things in a more sustainable manner. Sustainable finance, as Chris rightly mentioned, it's being pushed to the forefront. And I think both the wealth tech, the reg tech, the banks and financial institutions here are very much looking at that, and how fintech or technology can be really a key driver to accelerate that agenda. So there is a silver lining, I think, around that, and hopefully we can come out this, stronger and better. The new normal is not exactly the same as the normal that we left. I was reading in Bloomberg an article recently that the office you go back to, for countries that are under lockdown, is not the same as the office when you left. The unfortunate thing is probably that it happened so fast. It happened so severely that it really has thrown a lot of us off balance. But I think the government has been doing a fantastic job in terms of providing funding relief. The Hong Kong government have just launched a third round of 137 billion of relief measures on top of the 30 billion anti-pandemic fund that was announced a little while ago. And I think overall it covers the different sectors, and there is a kind of solidarity, if you like, across the public and private sectors to help us get through this. After all, I do believe whether you're in Qatar, Luxembourg, or Hong Kong, we are in this together, the post-COVID new normal.
Great, I like that very much. Jochen, yes, I think you wanted to say something.
Helen, if you don't mind, I have two follow-up questions. But first, let me congratulate to your new Secretary for Financial Services and Treasury, Christopher Hui, who has a sound understanding of FinTech and really will be supportive. We know him very well because he happens to be also board member of the World Alliance, and he's definitely a worthy successor of James Lau. But to my questions, you know, in the last years, we had a lot of discussion about the virtual banks in Hong Kong coming. They're now admitted 8 or even more, if I remember right. So my question is, what is the impact of COVID-19 on them? Is it more an opportunity for them? Is it more a threat that the people go back to the traditional banks? And the second question, you know, Hong Kong, yourself, your organization, but also many other organizations have worked a lot on the Greater Bay Area project in the recent years. There's a plan of the startup center at the border to Shenzhen, but also in mainland, in Zhuhai, Guangdong province, a lot of startup center with focus on FinTech are thriving. So is that will that speed up, or is that now on hold? What is your view on this point?
Yeah, thank you so much. I think basically, if you look at kind of Hong Kong as one of the finance centers and a financial hub, definitely I think that forward-looking momentum is very much there. It's not being put on hold. The kind of, you know, collaboration, if you like, with Greater Bay Area, and we just had a very in-depth panel at the last Hong Kong FinTech Week, you know, talking about GBA, Greater Bay Area, and how the opportunities of, you know, capital flow, of talent flow, and so on, and how the kind of leveraging the strengths that different cities might have, and how that could be complementary. It's still very much in the forefront. COVID has provided disruptions, I think, not just for Asia, but across the board. But I think probably those disruptions are not really like long term, hopefully, unless you look at one of the most bare kind of scenario about the post-COVID recovery. But I think it's very much still the focus of Greater Bay Area, definitely. You know, at the FinTech Association, definitely we are very much working with all the not only tech giants, you know, in the Greater Bay Area, you know, the Tencents, Alibabas, Ping Ans of this world, but also the very vibrant startup community and the very vibrant, you know, group of investors, not just VCs, but maybe even some other family offices that are looking to deploy investments into tech-related. Could be a technology fund, could be, you know, tech startups, but there is very much that kind of momentum, if you like, going on as well.
Thank you very much, Helen, for that. Thank you, Jochen, for those questions. You know, Chris, let's talk about those disruptions a little bit. You know, you mentioned, you know, the kind of freedom of movement issue has become, you know, obviously impossible given COVID. Luxembourg has built a very strong financial centre in general. As we mentioned before, you know, the internet giants are also using Luxembourg as a base. You know, what's the crisis going to do, or what, you know, coming out of the crisis rather? How is that? You know, how are some of those challenges going to be addressed? And do you foresee, you know, that Luxembourg is going to sort of focus much more strongly on financial innovation, on fintech, and on online activity as opposed to more traditional financial services activities?
To be honest with you, I think that we will soon arrive at a point where we can't talk about, where we stop talking about incumbent financial services and fintech. I think that, one of the things that COVID, really demonstrates is that, even if you're in an incumbent financial services provider, there is significant value in investing in technology. And I think that, maybe in the very short term, people are really in a firefighting mode and, trying to get their business, keep their business turning over. But I think that COVID is very much a catalyst for incumbents to look at how they can really, gain efficiencies, unlock new revenues through the use of technology. And I think that's always been something that's been there, but I think it's accelerated by COVID-19, definitely. And it's one of the aspects that when we talk about fintech in Luxembourg, we take very seriously. It's not about a situation of incumbents versus fintechs. It's about how can fintechs and incumbents work together to deliver greater efficiency for the financial centre as a whole. So, for instance, I wouldn't necessarily talk about the payment sector in Luxembourg. We obviously have had PayPal here since 2007 with a banking license. We've had Amazon having an EMI license here since 2010, and a number of other companies like Alipay and Airbnb more recently. But I wouldn't talk about them as a separate thing from the rest of the financial centre. I think that going forwards, definitely the impact of technology will be very strong in areas all the way from wealth management and corporate banking through both retail, mutual, and alternative funds. In 2017 we set up the Luxembourg House of FinTech precisely as a platform to enable that kind of coordination between fintechs and new startups and the established financial centre. And I think going forward, definitely COVID will be a major driver of bigger investment in technology in companies that already have been established for a long time.
Thank you for that, Chris. Just on that, and pertinent to the conversation and comments from Chris and also from Helen, we've launched a poll. Please do vote. The question: how much does location matter for the success of fintech and financial services businesses? We ran this last week as well, and I have to say that the answer is very similar to the answers from today's participants is very similar to last week's. Increasingly it seems that location, it matters less when it comes to the success of financial services businesses, and the only slight tragedy is I wish we'd done this in February just to see how much the needle has shifted before and after, or before and during the pandemic. Let's talk now about the support for financial services, and I take your point, Chris. It's not just we should absolutely start to take down the distinction between innovators and incumbents, because as I think we're all feeling and seeing, COVID, and we've probably all seen that meme on LinkedIn, which is COVID has been the main driver of many a bank's digital strategy. So absolutely, we need to start taking that distinction down. But of course, 2008 was very much a banking crisis. We saw a lot of money pumped into financial services, particularly to incumbent banks. But actually, the outcome in the end was a whole heap of financial innovation. So what is it? Let's talk a little bit about support for innovation, whether it's at the incumbent level or at the innovator level. Henk, you talked, and then I'll come to perhaps to you, Helen, afterwards. Henk, you talked a little bit about some of the programs that you're trying to implement, or you are implementing in Qatar. Sometimes it's money is good, and putting money and initiatives help that. But what else is it that's going to help you create a kind of really vibrant fintech ecosystem that does some of the things we've been talking about today? Enabling digital access, pushing the goals of a smaller country like Qatar itself, and driving connectivity.
Yes, thank you. So although location may not seem to be important, I think if you want to do business, at least in this part of the world, there's a cultural heritage where people, like to meet and know each other a bit better. So whoever wants to do business in this part of the world, maybe not all the time you have to be here, but at least you have to discover this area. And then I think a financial center like ours, can help. I definitely see a future where people may be set up in different places. So we are adjusting our rep offices program for that. No need to be here all the time. Of course, you can do business if you have a certain legal platform. So I think that location is important when it comes to jurisdiction as well. So we like to become a mini Luxembourg. We're far away from that, but our regulations are sound. The same for aircraft finance, and I would say the same for fintech, because a fintech company will only come, as I said before, if there is business, and if we are able to give that access to the nearby markets, I think it's important. The other thing I see is specifically on innovation are platforms, SME lending platforms. We see initiatives like a company called Deposit Book in the UK, for instance. They connect deposit givers and financial institutions. So not all of the financial institutions have access to all liquidity. Even though, let's say, there is a $6 trillion now inputted in the system by the Fed, there's still countries and banks having difficulty in getting access to those dollars. So we see a lot of initiatives coming from Europe, a company like InstiMatch, where you can see money market platforms developing in a quick pace. So countries or financial centers where you can host those platforms, I think will be winners because those platforms will be more and more common.
Excuse me. Thank you very much. Oops, somehow that's happened. Thank you, Helen. Let's hear from your side of things. What support can be done to enable innovation communities to thrive? And clearly, Hong Kong has an advantage because you have some very sizable financial services institutions, and you also have China, Greater China on the doorstep. But what are some of the things you're seeing that are working?
Well, ironically, COVID has been a huge tailwind behind more innovation. It's an unintended kind of consequence, if you like. Because if someone was talking about the 8 virtual bank licenses that the Hong Kong Monetary Authority have issued. Now, actually, some of them have gone live already. The ZA Bank has gone live, and these other ones are in the pilot rollout phase, very much so. And I think riding on the tailwind of COVID, which really forces a lot of people to look at things more innovatively, to look at different ways of accessing financial services. It's not just going to a typical bank branch, or it's not just going to a typical brick and mortar kind of retail store. All these are innovation ways in which, all the across industry sectors, actually, you are seeing. Now, I know that the travel industry is being hard hit, no doubt about that. But, actually, I was, quite relieved and sort of refreshed to find a few of the platforms, like a Klook, Booking.com or others, sort of finding ways to run webinars, to run things, or armchair travel, just to keep the momentum going on a little bit. So I think people are actually finding ways to deal with it. And I think a lot of the platforms, a lot of the digitized offering will be here to stay. It's going to be a huge shift, if you like, a much faster shift than we had anticipated. So financial institutions can no longer afford to say, digital transformation is a nice to have, let's look at it. I don't think we're ready anytime soon. This is all good, but let's put it at the back burner. Suddenly, COVID has pushed everything from the back burner to the front. And I think people that really have a bit more agility, a bit more innovative capacity would really come out of it a bit stronger.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you for that, Helen. I couldn't agree more. Jochen, I mean, let's turn to you just quickly, actually, because it strikes me that, you know, world organisations like yourselves are going to become more relevant. Not so much because the world needs another organisation, but to sort of, you know, this is a global. It's a global crisis. FinTech is increasingly, as we've said, or financial services is a global industry. But innovation needs support. Are you seeing more relevance as a body? And, you know, what can organisations like yourselves do to kind of tie different markets together and to get the world thinking about, you know, solutions and opportunities that are, you know, at a bigger level than a national one?
Yeah. Basically, as the World Alliance and its members, we think first what we expect from our governments, which is a fair question, because most of us are quite close to the political leadership and can voice their concerns. Let me put it that way. But also, of course, we think even more what we can contribute. Let me start with the first topic very briefly. Of course, more on the defensive side, we see some tendencies we all don't like very much. Protectionism, which might even move to the financial sector. I haven't witnessed this yet, but this could also come. Currently, it's more restriction to travel, movement of people, and so on. We had these tendencies already before COVID-19, but now this is even worse. And yeah, we as financial centers want to be quite outspoken on that this is not a good idea. And not only for the financial industry, this is least of our concern, but for all the economies, people and their lives. But on the positive side, innovation. This is, of course, important for all of us. All our members are FinTech hubs themselves. They focus innovation. We help to bridge best practice among them, and also help FinTech companies to expand globally. All our members have the view they're as happy for their local FinTechs to step out, because this means also their headquarter will hire more people if the company internationally is successful. But at the same time, they're also happy for international FinTechs coming in and setting up subsidiaries or offices and so on. Very positive aspect. And my last thought on this is I personally hope that the current crisis will intensify the trend towards sustainable finance also via FinTech, or let me put it that way, FinTechs following the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, at least one or several of them. We have seen this before, but there are now so many opportunities directly in the pandemic, but also beyond, to really make a change. Not only a commercial change, but also a change to our lives. I see, for instance, blockchain companies addressing the pandemic. I see FinTech companies trying to help the governments to spread out the subsidizes or loans to small and medium-sized enterprises, and so on and so forth. In some cases, FinTechs can do it maybe better than traditional banks. They are closer to the market. They don't have so much legacy on the IT side, but also on the balance sheets. And this can come handy. I'm not saying there's a solution for all the problems, but in many cases they can help. And this is, of course, something we want to promote and help to convince the governments to also consider FinTech companies and not necessarily for those services.
Thank you very much, Jochen. Chris, we can't obviously talk about financial services without regulation. Henk talked about the sort of the English law principles of Qatar, and obviously other parts of the Gulf have also adopted that route. We've also talked about freedom of movement, and we can't talk about Europe, unfortunately. Despite COVID, we still have to talk about Brexit. what's your perspective on this sort of protectionist move? Because we certainly have seen, across Europe, before, pre-crisis, sort of moves to defend national interests over European ones. Do you see this as an opportunity for Luxembourg to kind of solidify itself? Do you see opportunities to kind of play a role in trying to kind of keep trade open and seize opportunities that way? What's your take there?
I think to be honest with you, I think it's a little bit early to say, but I think there is a good chance that events like Brexit, and on the one hand, and COVID on the other hand, actually reinforce a sense of European solidarity. You saw von der Leyen announcing ideally a commission-led program of up to €1 trillion of funding to get out of the current pandemic crisis. And I think that I think this also serves as a catalyst in the European context for us to look at what actually binds us together as well as what separates us. In a Luxembourg context, I think that Luxembourg does particularly well when there is freedom of movement, when there are free borders between people, when there is openness to the outside. Our financial centre is built on cross-border financial activity. Our country, as it goes, is very international. 50% of about 50% of Luxembourg's population is actually foreign. So we're very much pro-globalization and pro cross-border financial services. And I think that going forwards, we have to admit that COVID-19 shows exactly how globalized the world that we live in is already, and it's not something that we can pull back from. In fact, I think COVID-19 highlights what a falsehood it is to try and pull back from globalization. So I'm not overly concerned in the long term about wars going up. I think it's a good opportunity to demonstrate solidarity both on a European level and potentially even more globally.
Thank you very much. Henk, do you have anything to add?
Yes, I agree. Basically, I think yes. I think in the long run, we have a different way of working, but there will be more need to connect centers as well. So, for instance, we do a lot with Turkey. We will definitely reach out to you, Helene. On Asia, we see a cooperation. So I think this cooperation model is happening. And from my part of view, it may be dangerous to say, I think the wind is blowing east. So many innovations coming from the east. Still Europe, I think, is active in FinTech, but the guys in the east are picking up quickly. So let's make sure that we all connect and to share that innovation among our financial institutions and population.
Thank you very much. Good. Yes, I mean, certainly, the world does seem to be increasingly an Asian-centric one, and there are some very exciting things happening on the technology front. Of course, we've also seen how well many countries in Asia have handled the crisis respective to their Western peers, and I won't name any names because that wouldn't be kind. We have to leave it there, I'm afraid. We've come to the end of our hour. I think we can all agree there are some positive things that are coming out of COVID, and I think this concept of greater collaboration, greater interactivity and connectivity between regions is something that we as a financial services marketplace community have to hold on to. And I particularly, I have particularly high hopes for this move to the Sustainable Development Goals, and I certainly hope that becomes a real focus for the decade that we are now in, because clearly there are opportunities there. the world does need it, and we must come together to realise that and make that happen. I want to, can you all just please thank our panellists from today. Helen, thank you very much in Hong Kong. Thank you for joining us. Henk in Doha. Chris, thank you from Luxembourg. And of course, Jochen, our co-host over in Frankfurt. Thank you very much also. It's been a pleasure to have you with us. I hope we can do more with you, the World Alliance, in future. Our focus turns to women founders in a session next week, and then quite a high level panel. We're not suggesting we're going to come up with any answers to this, but on the 28th of May, a discussion about the new reality and how we as FinTech or financial services can build a digital economy to match that. So I hope you'll join us, and we'll see you at another time. Thank you again, and have a great day. Stay safe, stay well, stay sane, and here's to better times ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you
for this great moderation. And also thank you to Benita and Alice behind the scenes for their great work.
Thank you very much, Jochen. It's been a pleasure. Take care, everybody. Stay well. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
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 Bye.
Thanks.